Hello and welcome to Thursday Night Talk. This is a show where we discuss the week in Humboldt, the local issues and the local personalities with the local personalities. I'm Talvi Fried and I'll be your local host for the next hour. On November 5th, the voters of Eureka and the voters of Humboldt get to vote for Ward 2 Eureka City Council, and they have a choice between incumbent Kati Moulton and challenger Kenny Carswell. Try as we might to get Kenny Carswell to be a guest on this show, our multiple requests were met with silence. Our very many requests have been met with silence. There's not much we can do about that, so we're giving the whole next hour to Kati Moulton. Kati is a current Eureka City Council member, Old Town business owner, and artistic director of the nonprofit Ink People Center for the Arts. Moulton secured his... Well, Kati's got something to say about that. Moulton secured his seat on the council in November 2020. She has been a searing critic of Measure F, who representatives also turned down any chance and invitation to even talk to me. They will not respond, which is so frustrating. I said I wasn't going to go on a rant about this, though I believe that this show, for those who are listening, the show is about giving a voice to everybody in the community, and that means all sides and all representatives. And if you are running for something, I think you should want to have your voice heard. You should want people to know what you're running for, and you should be able to talk about it. It's having a backbone to what you are portraying. So that there has been no response is very, very frustrating. This deals also with the Yes on F campaign and the No on F campaign, and that has been very frustrating. Kenny Carswell is employed by Measure F backer Security National, who is owned by Arkley, which Arkley, again, you are welcome on the show. I want to have a discussion. I'm not going to put you down. I want you to have your voice heard by those who maybe don't always agree with you. And I think that's a healthy thing to have in this community. Disagreeing opinions can have discussions, and maybe we can meet somewhere. Doesn't have to be one way or the other. So on that note, Kati,
Hello.
You're running for re-election of Eureka City Council Ward 2. We did
That's
Ward
right.
2 last week. Ward 4 has its own issues. That is the railway track, balloon track, I forget what they call it, but it goes down. And then Ward 2, describe what Ward 2 is for listeners who aren't exactly sure of the
Oh, yeah. Ward 2 is a vibrant little working class neighborhood. We are between Winco and Fort Humboldt, basically, the south corner of Eureka over here. We encompass half of the mall. But the big issue over here is the biggest plot of land in Ward 2, and that is the Jacobs campus, which is tied up in Measure F and has been tied up in a variety of things for many, many years. I'd say the folks in Ward 2 are eager to see something happen there, and I think it's my job to help make sure that whatever happens, they get to keep their seat at the table. I did just want to, just a quick correction, because I'm no longer the artistic director of the Ink People. I was for several years, many years, great organization. I love it. I did leave to go run Scrap Humboldt right before the pandemic shut us down. And then I spent the pandemic years raising money to open a new creative reuse center, which I now run in Old Town. So I run a business. It's a nonprofit, so I don't own it. and I'm no longer with the Ink People staff, but
What
I support
is
them
it?
and I love them, and I
And
run projects through the Ink People.
what is the business called and where is it located?
It's Maker's Apron Creative Reuse. I like to say it's like if an art store and a hardware store fell in love and made a little thrift shop. We are an arts access and waste reduction nonprofit. We teach sustainable behavior with creativity. So, on one side, that looks like we get donations of yarn and fabric and paints and all kinds of home improvement supplies and art supplies, and we sell them back to the community at affordable prices, like thrift store prices. And the other side is that we do classes and community art events that promote waste reduction and sustainable waste practices. But that's my day job, my other day job. We're here
Yes.
today to talk about city council.
Which I do, I've realized that I have this big question for everybody running, and it's how are you going to get along? And when, as an incumbent, it kind of means that you've proven, as an incumbent who isn't hated, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's
It
good to know that I'm not
yeah.
hated. Thank you for saying
Well, I
that.
don't know if people hate you. I don't, and most people I know in the community. I live in Ward 5, so and it's I don't like to consider myself that heavily involved in politics, but political discussions happen very frequently in Eureka. It's just the mindset that we have living here. We always want it
Sure.
better, which I mean, that's one thing. It's a big community and everybody always wants to better the community, be it
Well,
about
especially local stuff. I mean, you talk about, keeping the conversation going and divisiveness. I think it's easier and more reasonable to engage in local politics stuff because one, it's within our grasp. Like I can very directly affect local politics. I mean, as a politician, obviously, but even just as a community member, in a way that national or even state politics seems so far outside of my control or my influence. And so people feel like they can have an influence on it, but also it tends to be less partisan stuff. So few things that we get into on the council are left or right, red or blue. It's more nuanced. And our job, or my job, I see as keeping the public involved, keeping people engaged and informed, and then finding compromises and solutions that work for everybody. Or what do they say? A good compromise leaves everybody a little bit angry, like
yeah.
equally angry, but for different reasons. Yeah, that's what
Well,
we're
you
going
answered
for.
my question without me even having to act or ask it, which is how are you going to get along with people who are very much on a extremist opposing side of function, which again, I'm really frustrated that certain groups and people refuse to discuss what they're fighting for. And
Mm.
such as Measure F. I am so exhausted with Measure F and the yes on F. Honestly, I'm exhausted with no on F too. It's just like, okay, I feel like most people have already voted, and I'll admit I am no, like absolutely not. That's ridiculous. And I know that it's nuanced, but I also have friends who are yes on Measure F. And it's just, but the fact that nobody wants to have the true discussion, and I think it might be a fear of how they'll be seen by the moderate. And I consider myself very moderate. I try not to vote along political lines. I try to vote for the best for the community. As you said, it's very nuanced, and there really isn't a everyone's for this community. When you're dealing with smaller local level politics, it's very for the community, whatever that means, and less about right wing or left wing. Though there are, moving on from that, because the whole Measure F thing just is frustrating. It's frustrating as a common citizen, as somebody who's just trying to get along. It's like, can we just vote and get it over with now? That's all I want. Like, just make a decision either way and let's deal with it as it comes. And though beyond that, I was talking last week to Measure 4 candidates, and while you say that yes, it is small local politics, what happens in Humboldt and especially Eureka affects California as a whole. We've got the wind farm, offshore wind farm coming up, which is a
Hmm.
huge, huge thing that's going to change the entire landscape of the county.
Yeah, that's true.
It,
And in a way, like I just got back from the League of California Cities where we met with the council, all went along with the staff, department heads from cities all over the state. So you're looking at council members and mayors and directors of public works and finance directors and city clerks from all over California. We get together and have this conference and kind of share ideas, look at what other people are doing that worked and didn't work, collaborate. And there's this other piece where the league lobbies the state on behalf of the cities. And so our representatives are able to go and lobby on behalf of Eureka, which is incredibly unique. We are a small city, we're a rural city, but we have big city problems because we serve the function of the big city. But just to say that when I go to this conference, what I've learned is that Eureka is really leading the way. I'll go to a session on creative solutions for homelessness, and they start talking about it. And it's like, okay, we're doing that. We're doing that. We won an award last year for doing that. Okay, we're doing this too. Like, it's good to see what we're up to is really pushing what's possible. And at the same time, I want more new ideas. When we look at how Eureka as a city, as an employer, as a fleet manager is dealing with our carbon footprint. We've been doing things that are far and away more advanced than what even bigger cities are doing, or even smaller cities with less work to do. So yeah, Eureka, in a way, influences and leads the states by example. If we can show that putting someone experiencing homelessness, putting them into housing with support for their addiction and employment training is cheaper and better in the long run than just throwing them into jail in an ever like ongoing cycle, just bagging and tagging, and then they get out and put them back in, and they get out and put them back in, preventing people from engaging with the system because now they've got a warrant. That we're actually spending this money in this way and ultimately saving money and helping people. But somebody has to do that. Not that we're the first to do that, but for a city our size, we're taking big leaps in finding solutions that are effective, even if they seem um, counterintuitive. Like you would assume paying for someone to be in housing or finding grant money, really, we're talking about finding grant money to put someone to housing, into treatment, is ultimately cheaper than treating the emergencies and the public health problems and the social problems that that person would cause otherwise if they didn't have that kind of support.
so speaking of that grant money, there are a few measures that would increase taxes for those who live
Mhm.
in Eureka, and I'm just wondering your stance on those.
Measure O is going to be a big deal. I know I went back and forth on it originally, but then once I saw the potential for matching funds, I'm going to have to, I'm supporting that one because I know we hit this 10% sales tax in Eureka, and it's like suddenly it's this threshold where people are like, we've been at 9.75 for so long, but bumping over 10, it's just like it's a watershed moment for people. They see it as way too much, and I definitely appreciate that. I also have to budget for groceries, like I get that. And the county has some unbelievable expenses in roads. We have a ton of roads way out in the middle of the nowhere. And these aren't flat, dry roads. These are windy, hilly roads with creeks going under them. These are complicated engineering situations that require constant maintenance so that people can have safe access in and out of their remote communities. I mean, I guess I would rather pay another quarter of a percent or sorry, half percent. I don't have it in front of me. Another less than 1% in sales tax at the grocery store, um, rather than having to replace my front end again when I hit another chuck hole on the Wildcat. And the fact that Measure O is going to open up these matching funds, it's like that's how it works. That's how county and that's how the state and money comes to us. You have to apply for these grants, and oftentimes there are matching funds required. But if you don't have a dollar to match those 3 or 4 other dollars, then you can't have it. So I think it's worth it for me. See better access for emergency vehicles, better access for the community, safer roads in general, just safer, smoother, better maintained roads, and a more balanced and stable budget. When you look at taxes that have a sundown, you're only going to have this tax for a year, then you can't really plan for maintenance. It's kind of like the difference between going to your annual checkup and going to the emergency room. The emergency room is much more expensive. Repairing roads that have been so far out of maintenance for so long is much more expensive than just taking care of the roads consistently. And Measure O, I believe, would allow for that kind of budgeting. So similar to Measure H in Eureka, now we can plan for our road maintenance. We can do the big projects that need to be done, but it's not a matter of chasing down these huge holes all over town because the road bed is eroding because we haven't been able to do the appropriate maintenance because we can't plan more than 1 year out for what we need to do. Taxes suck. I know.
Taxes are
I agree.
terrible.
But it's how we pay for the stuff we need.
I know, but I don't like being taxed about 30 to 40%. Every single paycheck is taken out of my paycheck, and then now I also have to, every time I go buy anything, I'm also taxed on that. And why is this not already built in? Where That's my biggest issue, is that there are so many funds, especially we're not a big city. We're a very powerful city. We are small, we are mighty, we have a lot of influence in the state. Though we for some reason, I feel like I'm already giving so much. Why another tax when there's already funds that should be allocated for that, instead of, say, a raise for everybody who's working within the city, who's making twice as much as anybody else working here and paying those same taxes, but they're not even paying the same taxes. It's just frustrating.
We'll point out that we are talking about a county measure here. So
Yeah.
I can't necessarily speak to the county's budgeting practices over the past few decades and why, what's built in and what's not. I do know that it's an organization that struggles for funding. I work with a lot of folks in the social work field, and I know that the county is not the best place to work. And part of that is that a lot of folks are, they're not paid what they're worth, even in the local market.
I
Um,
also I heard this phrase when I was younger, and it's work for the benefits. And a
ah,
lot of my friends who work in county, or they work in county level or city level even, and know they don't have much take home, but they have health benefits. They have health care.
mm,
They have, you get, if you want to
you
have a
get your
50,
retirement, you get vested in CalPERS. Yeah,
yeah,
that's valuable for sure.
which
But yeah, I can't really speak to the internal workings of the county budget, I'm afraid.
that's okay. It is a very kind of socialist perspective of, let's give so much to taxes. And full disclosure, my mom's from Finland. I'm very involved in Finnish life, and a lot of people use Finland as a, well, da da da, and I'm like, Finland is a population that's much smaller. It's got the same population as LA, And
Well,
a lot
and they're getting a lot of services for that. You're getting taxed very highly, but then your healthcare is paid for, your childcare is paid for, you're paid
exactly.
for, your family leave is paid for parents, for both parents or for all parents. I mean,
Well,
they're getting a lot more value out
yeah,
of that massive. So if you're paying 30-40% in taxes and you're not getting anything out of it but a headache, you
right.
know, or a war machine on the other side of the country, or benefits for big cities that don't make it out to the rural counties, then it's hard to see why. um that's big systems, man. You got to keep after them.
Big systems. We will be right back. You're listening or watching Thursday Night Talk. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talk. We are discussing the race for Eureka City Council Ward 2 with Kati Moulton. Before we go any further, I do want to remind all listeners, watchers, etc., Kenny Carswell chose to ignore multiple invitations to come on the show. We tried really hard. I promise. And fun note about Access Humboldt is for political discussions, as long as the forum is open, because this is it's an access station, as long as the forum is open to all, we can have whatever discussions we want. So I can full on say that, I'm not voting for Kenny because he refused to answer any questions. I would even if I look on Lost Coast Outpost, he's not really answering anything. And then, okay, can we discuss how weird it is that Robert Arkley, Rob, whatever, who
Robin.
I've invited on this show multiple times, and he has sent messages. Robin Arkley, fine, gave the loan to buy Kenneth, I don't know, a house in Ward 2. It's just very sus. It's super suspicious. It's all bad. It's all bad, and that there's like no discussion of things is just so. Kati, do you have anything to say about
Talvi.
that? You don't have to. I know it's almost better if we don't even talk about it because
I
there's
mean,
nothing
yeah.
good from that.
um if I have gotten myself into any trouble in my first term on council, it's because I am very forthright about what I'm thinking about a situation. I tend to say out loud what I think is going on. I have opinions. I don't necessarily agree with everybody. I value collaboration. I listen to everybody, but I don't pretend like I agree with people. And when I have an opinion about something that I'm supposed to have an opinion about, I will say it out loud. And that, I think, is important for representatives in a democracy. If somebody's going to go and be my personal expert in a governmental body so that they do that work so I don't have to, I want to know how they think. I want to know what their principles are. I want to be able to predict what they're going to do on my behalf. So that is why I'm out here answering all the questions, talking to all the interviewers, going on all the TV stations, anybody that's asked. I'm very happy to go and talk about my principles, my platform, my experience, what I have done, what I'd like to do.
So there is
So
a
I could just leave it at that. And that,
there is an editor's note from from the behind the scenes coming in, that is, Kenny would say he grew up in Ward 4 for what that's worth.
Ward two. Okay, yeah. No, to be fair, like I think I met his parents the other day out canvassing. And I definitely met some folks that were his neighbors. Mr.
Okay.
Carswell
Okay.
certainly grew up in Ward two. My understanding is that he had been living just outside of the ward. And if you kind of look at the map, it looks like Ward two. It's just like the city limits was a little further in from his house. I don't, you know. And so when it was time to run for office, he moved into the ward. He clearly purchased a house at this time on a deadline so that he could get into this race. Um, but no, he's not somebody, from out of the area. He's a local guy. I That's important to some people that somebody is born here or what high school they graduated from. I wasn't born in Humboldt, but I got here quick as I could. I came here as a young adult, and I have served this county from the moment I landed in over 20 years ago. Me and my F-150 and my cat. And immediately started doing
Hi.
homeless teenager outreach and have been working to
You
serve.
worked with the Raven Project for a while, I believe.
Yeah, I was a community health outreach worker with the Raven Project. Ran youth groups. Um, I We had a pretty big staff back then under RCAA, YS, the Youth Service Bureau. We were doing HIV testing. We were connecting kids with resources. We did a surprising amount of, I'm going to say rescue is a strong word, but diverting people from human trafficking. People who were runaways who were being manipulated, and they'd be allowed to come into the Raven, and no, the people who were attempting to control them couldn't come in because they were too old. So they'd send this 16-year-old girl in, and we would be able to, like, in private in the Raven, like as they're just there to get a sandwich or wash their laundry, we could have a conversation with them and discover that they're in trouble. And sending somebody back home on a bus, or literally pulling them in the front door and sending them out the back door into a van to get them to the Greyhound station while their abuser was waiting on the front porch for them to leave. I think that was some really important, really direct work that I was able to do. Raven Project is doing really, really, really good stuff then. Not to mention pulling kids off the street, giving them a job. They'd have the youth educators were coming from the homeless teen population. And this was in the early aughts. These were the kids whose families had lost the logging jobs. These are people who were trying not to fall into like generational loops of poverty and despair. We're able to kind of like help those folks. And I went from the Raven Project over to the Ink People. I served as their artist in residence for about 7 years, running the Rural Borough Mural Bureau under redevelopment, which was we had at-risk youth, including kids on probation, like juveniles on probation, would go out and paint murals, and they would serve their hours with me. So they get caught doing graffiti, and we'd be like, "Hey, come paint something on purpose and spend some time with an effective mentor that cares about you." And Dwayne Flatmo ran that program for a long time. He turned a lot of kids around, and I was happy to pick up that mantle and take that on. From there, I went into the Mars Project, which is a media and arts resource zone. Again, working with at-risk youth, not specifically, but anybody who wanted to could come in. And it was very youth-driven what they wanted to learn about. And there was a lot of push for audio production and video production. And what we found was that some of these kids, like they might have been in juvenile hall, they might be people who were considered thugs or outcasts by the adults in their life, and they'd come into the Mars Project, and we teach them some media production skills, and then they'd get good at it, and then they had a reel, and then they could audition with their reel, and it didn't matter who they were, what their name was, what their past was, or what their skin color was. They could get jobs based on their work, and that was a huge step up for some people. And we've got professional producers, professional musicians that came out of the Mars Project, because they were able to pick up those skills and turn that into a career when otherwise, who knows what might have happened to them if they had just tried a more traditional path to employment. After the Mars Project, during that, that's when I was the artistic director at the Ink People as well, running community art gallery. All through that time, I was the president of the Kinetic Universe, running the nonprofit that runs the Kinetic Grand Championship. Other great people running the event itself. I was like the head of the business, whereas there were like event coordinators and volunteer coordinators who did the actual cage, planning of porta potties and things like that. And then I left the Ink People to go run Scrap Humboldt, as I mentioned before. Then the pandemic shut us down, and now I'm doing my eco art groovy mission over at Maker's Apron. But yeah, it's over 20 years of serving the community, whether it's youth, mentorship, community arts, ecology, and there's lots of ways to help. And I just try and use my creativity and my ability to mentor and to build collaborations to just try and make things better on a small scale. And then when I had the opportunity to run for office, I saw this great potential for helping the whole community, not just one kid at a time or one project at a time, but the economic base, the infrastructure. And when I can help to create a Eureka that is more beneficial to all of its citizens, so we can have good jobs, so we can have safe streets, so we can have a waterfront that isn't going to get inundated by climate change because we're pretending like it's not going to happen.
Right. So there is a project happening on the waterfront, which is kind of by the side. Uh, what is happening with the park that's supposed to be built?
Which park?
Like in
At the
Halverson?
amphitheater?
Yeah. I'm just wondering what's going on with that.
My understanding is that there is a park so there's the Adorney Center, the Seiko Amphitheater, and Halverson Park all in one line there. That's technically, so that's a big park and community facility. And my understanding is that we got grant funding to build a playground at the amphitheater.
So it wasn't
So instead of
fund, it was two wonderful individuals. I apologize for not remembering their names, but they left a fund to build the park. So it's a how do you, instead of sending the money elsewhere, they said this money is aside. I forget what it's called, but it's some sort of you know mortuary estate situation.
Mm,
So that's where that money came from.
sure, yeah, I think I know there was a grant award involved. Maybe it was a matching thing.
Yeah.
But sorry, I'd have to go look into the details of that. But yeah, it's supposed to be a playground. I mean,
Cool. So
which is cool because there are families living in Old Town and there's only one playground down there.
and I think
The
people
one, the
are actual I love Old Town though. Just seeing all the kids, it's Halloween season. I'm not sure when this show is going to play or replay, but right now it is Halloween season, and seeing all the kids go out and in their tiny little, I mean, they're tiny people in their cute little costumes is just how excited they are just to go to every business. I saw them in Henderson Center, and I had to go to Old Town for some other work I had to do. And I was just like looking at all these cute little kids that are having so much fun. And I think about that, and I know that's such a small town thing because I'm like, oh, and now I look extra hard. I'm like, is there glass on the ground? Is there things like that? Small things that can affect. You don't want a baby goblin or whatever they're dressed as, to step on that. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. So to have a park, I think is really important. Though I do want to move more on a global scale. as, again, there's the wind farm happening. California is a major powerhouse. There, you are undoubtedly part of the community and very immersed in it, and a healthy, you're a healthy part of the community. That's no doubt about that. Though it's also, is the city council willing, are those on the city council willing to work on a global scale? And that involves not just California, but the United States, because California, especially if we are going to be a major seat in California, are we going to be able to work with commerce ties with Texas? And especially, and by commerce ties, I often mean there's a lot of women coming here for uh, a vacation, because they need things. And that's just part of California. And so we are a tourist destination. And as a tourist destination, how are we going to work with the other states that are very antagonistic? And how are we going to work on a national level and a global level with, say, other countries? I believe Arcata has a sister city in Japan, and I want
We have
Eureka
a
to have
sister
a
city in
sister
Japan.
city. Yeah, I want Eureka to have a sister city in Finland. I'm like, come on, Eureka, Helsinki. I see this. I see this happening.
Yeah, we have a sister city relationship with Kamisu, Japan, and a friendly city relationship with it's in New Zealand. I forgot the name of it.
That's okay.
Um, First, I'm not sure how many. If somebody is coming to Humboldt for healthcare, like God bless them.
Right.
Very
Fair.
good luck. Yes, one of the drawbacks of living here is the lack of access to healthcare for sure. Okay, so as far as the wind industry, the development, the idea here is, so the national government, the federal government has control over the actual place where the actual wind is going to happen. They're the ones who have courted different companies who are signing the lease with the companies that are going to be putting the wind farm out there and operating it. And then we're talking about an industrial complex on Samoa, out there, like a big, on some developed land. The land isn't developed already, but we're talking about a huge complex building these wind farm pieces. They're not just going to be the wind farm pieces that we're going to put out here, but the idea then is that we have this infrastructure and we're going to be the ones building those wind turbines for all the wind development up and down the coast. So this is where they will be built. So one, that is a huge investment in this area, with the potential for lots of new jobs, potential for service jobs then to support those jobs. So this is a big potential for growth. And there is a great potential for harm. One, we need to be moving away from fossil fuels. We need to be putting less greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. As a coastal city, we are on the front line of sea level rise and the effects of climate change. And we're seeing fire refugees from all over the state and from other states coming here because they want to be in California, but they want to be somewhere damp. Boy, do we got damp. So we're getting this climate impact from a variety of different angles, and we need to be doing something about that as a community, as a state, as a nation, as a world. We need to be addressing this. And the impacts of the industry itself on the fisheries, on the bay, on the health of the bay, are potentially, there's a lot of potential there for really negative impacts. I went to a meeting the other day and I sat down and it was supposed to be some folks talking about how to develop city level policies around green energy. But when I sat down, there was somebody, policy author, somebody who helps cities develop policies on one side of the table. And then the other side of the table were a bunch of representatives from the Eureka government. And
Okay.
I was surprised at how they were.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
We're on one of my favorite topics now, which is the tribal nations.
So I was very surprised at them expressing how few tables they had been invited to. And
Really?
we're talking about like we just got the Klamath opened up. We've just got salmon swimming upstream for the first time in decades. We're rebuilding, slowly rebuilding the health of that river and that entire ecosystem, which extends out past the shelf, which extends out to where these turbines are going to be. And the tribes were in favor of it, in my understanding. And then some tribes from the East Coast came in and told them what happened to their fisheries when the wind turbines went up, and that there were deleterious effects, that it had a bad effect on their fisheries. And so the Yurok are raising some very reasonable concerns about what's going to happen to the salmon.
So
And
we talked
then,
about coming up on this. Let's take a quick break,
okay,
and then
because I
we
want to
come.
talk about Tuluwat.
We are going to talk about Tillawat
Okay.
right on Thursday Night Talk. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talk. I'm your local host, Talvi Fried. I'm here with Kati Moulton, who is rerunning for you're the incumbent runner for City Council Ward 2 of the city of Eureka. If you missed the earlier parts of the show, please go check us out on YouTube. You can find us, just look up Access Humboldt. There's a whole playlist of Thursday Night Talks. You can definitely check that out. We also replay on Fridays, the radio show. We are on TV channels 11, 12. We got a lot of that. We're on one of my favorite discussions that I wanted to bring up earlier, but we got there eventually. And that is the tribal nations of Humboldt County and the involvement they have or don't have in city politics. And let me, real quick, before we start, because I do have a bias here, and I think that one of the reasons that Eureka and Humboldt County is so powerful and so innovative and so just on the leading edge of everything that the rest of the world looks at, other countries look at, is because of the knowledge and just brilliancy of the tribal nations in Humboldt County. So we have Blue Lake Casino and wisdom, absolute wisdom, looking at Blue Lake Casino and the Blue Lake communities. They were looked at during the pandemic for their ability to create energy. And we are talking about energy now with the wind farms,
Yeah.
which that's a big discussion. I know that they have the wind farm crew has contacted, they have tribal representatives part of the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
It was very important. But
Yeah,
as somebody sitting on the city of Eureka, go on now.
okay. Yeah, just that when I went to this table and was listening to the folks from the Yurok tribe talk about their concerns and talk about how many tables they haven't been at and how many tables the Wiyot have not been at, when dredging the bay is going to have an impact on Tuluwat Island. They're already fighting erosion there, and I don't know what that is going to be. I don't want to presume to speak for the tribal governments. I would just say that I feel like the city of Eureka doesn't have direct control over a lot of things when it comes to this sort of situation. But what we can do is push for collaboration and inclusion. And if I can, if people are asking me my opinion, then my opinion is that you need to go talk to the WIAT and you need to go talk to the UROC. You need to talk to the folks whose livelihood is dependent on these fisheries, whose sovereign territory might be literally eaten away by allowing the infrastructure that's going to make the wind energy building possible. I also take some issue with the idea of having this big industry here. The jobs may be here, but the energy then isn't. Is the energy going to get trunked across the mountains to go power somewhere else, and we don't even have it benefiting our grid?
Well, that's
Is this
just to
all? Is
inform viewers and listeners. One of the reasons that I was kind of for the power station on Humboldt Bay, which was originally a nuclear power station, but they've retrofitted it to run other types of power. But none of that power actually hits Eureka until the city of Eureka said, no, we need to be able to be islanded.
Mhm.
And that was a big thing a few years ago. So so there's a big history on the coast with that. And so yeah, just
I mean,
information.
ultimately, when we're talking about a power grid that is controlled thousands of miles away, then and when it's something that is so essential, like our water comes from here, we clean it right up the road here. We need, I just think that the power should be a public utility. There was it's a mistake to be having a profit motive in the middle of that when you're talking about an enormous public investment, and it is public money that is invested in it, but the benefits of that are going to not necessarily going back to the public. But that's neither here nor there. What the city of Eureka can do is work with the other governments, including the tribal governments, to make sure that we have a seat at the table. And when it comes to are the jobs going to local folks, are they good jobs? Does the wind industry work with our local universities and community colleges to make sure that there are certification programs so that the high school kids right now can go through college, and by the time they graduate, they are a skilled worker that is ready to get one of those good jobs in the industry when it's ready to go. That's what I want to see. I want to see the right people at the table, and that the right people is everybody. And that the folks who are able to make those decisions are listening to those folks. And I feel like that's kind of my job, is to push for inclusion in the conversation. The city can only do so much. We collect sales tax and pave roads and pay for cops. Like, uh, there's only we can influence and we can push, but really, are the real benefit that's going to come around wind energy is going to, if anything comes to benefit the community directly, it's going to be because we have all collaborated together to make sure that that happens. Because big companies will very happily bypass community benefit for the benefit of their shareholders. That's their job. We need to help make sure that those benefits are outweighing the cost to our community, because there is a cost. There's going to be strain on our infrastructure. I'm talking like it's already, like it's definitely going to happen, because it's probably definitely going to happen.
It is.
That
No, it's gonna happen.
anything that we can do to mitigate the negative effects and to make sure that the companies that are making money off of our community have to benefit our community to offset that. I think that's where we can go.
To the point of you're talking like it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's done. There's no arguments anymore. It's kind of like my annoyance with Measure F. Like, pick one, finally.
You're just like, can we be done with this?
We get done with this and move on and actually do something. That'd be great instead of all the bickering.
Oh my gosh. And then we're talking about signs, and we're talking about, this and that, and oh, the mailers and stuff, like, and all of this, all the drama around Measure F tends to gloss right over the fact that there is a real ongoing housing crisis. And we say that phrase so much that it's lost meaning, but I've got constituents living 2 and 3 families to a house. We've got families living in cars, people who can afford housing, who want housing, who need housing. We've got people who are living in a place that is so ridiculously overpriced because there's so few rentals. Like, this is a quality of life and a public safety issue. And we don't
I'm
need to be
I'm here to
um
let you go on about housing because I know that's a big, big issue. And I know
okay.
everybody, and I know we all care about housing. There's nobody in this community that doesn't look at somebody that's like, wow, you're a good person. There are good people who live on the streets.
Oh God, yeah, of
And it's
course.
hard. There's no decent human being that doesn't look at that and go, you deserve housing. That's not the issue.
Well,
One of the issues is how do we create a city and with all the kids and all the people, all the retirees who are going to have to work now, there's no nest egg for them. That went away during the pandemic for a lot of people. It's not about that. It's that the big opportunity really is the wind, the offshore wind, and how do we get people trained? How do we use the expertise so that a father or mother or retired grandfather or grandmother or even a single veteran who decided not to have kids because they're too crazy, or crazy in parentheses. How do we get all of the people of our community to be healthy, to be successful? And one of that is education, which I feel like you were veering towards in that discussion of there is this big wind farm, there's this huge opportunity that's happening, and everybody wants a piece of that pie. How do we make sure that Eureka and the people who live here, who call this home, have a piece of that pie?
well, on the one side, creating these collaborations and enforcing these collaborations and working with organizations that are lobbying, whether it's the state or the federal government, to make sure that our voices are heard. That's one side. On the other side, making sure that our cost of living here stays reasonable or becomes more reasonable. One of the things that the city is doing in developing affordable housing is creating income tied situations. So we talk about low income housing, and I'd like to define what that means, because low income, 80% of Eureka qualifies as low income. This, we're talking about a family of two making less than $75,000 a year. We're talking about a mom with a job who makes $20 an hour who has one kid. These are working class folks. These are most of our neighbors. And when we build these affordable housing developments, and when the city does it and works with a nonprofit developer, then we can tie that rent to their income. So no matter how much money you make, your rent will never be more than 30% of what you make. And that's true for grandma on Social Security. It's true for mom with a job. It's true for, two-parent household with both with full-time jobs and with kids. And having that guarantee that they're only ever going to have to spend 30% of their income on housing can have incredible benefits. Now you can afford they can afford to spend more money locally. They can afford groceries. They can afford healthcare. They can afford luxuries. And more opportunities for their kids and for their families. So one side is making sure that industries benefit our community, but the other side is making sure that our community aren't being bled dry or gentrified right out of our neighborhoods because people are coming in from places where the cost of living is even so much higher that paying $1,200 a month for one room in a house seems really reasonable, which it's not. And this is what's happening up and down Eureka. So when I talk about affordable housing, Just having more housing is going to make it affordable. Having more houses in town that have ADUs, have like mother-in-law units out back, having lots that are split and now they can be two lots and there's another house built on that lot. Maybe both of those houses have a mother-in-law unit. There's just more housing. That's going to be very helpful. Having bigger apartment buildings or townhouses with the like nonprofit developers that the city's working with, that can all loosen it up. And when renters have more money to spend, guess where they're going to spend it? They're gonna spend it at local businesses. And when there is less heightened demand and desperation around housing, then landlords are more likely to have to follow the law. Talk about people who, well, their window is leaking or their door is broken, but they said something to the landlord about it, but they're not going to fix it because they know that renter is desperate, and if they get kicked out, then they're just screwed. So people stay quiet. You want people to be able to stand up for themselves, to stand up for their rights, and have safe, quality places to live. So making more housing available will make all of the housing that is available better.
Awesome. So
that's the idea anyway.
Yeah. No additions. Yes.
No notes. Done. Check it out.
Great job.
I just like to fight against this idea that, when I talk to people about the housing, they're like, oh, I don't want to see another homeless shelter, in here. It's like, well, we're not talking about homeless shelter. We're talking about working families. We're talking about, you still have to qualify. You still have to have a job, or, in some situations, you still have to have a job. You still have to, you're still going to get a pile of applicants, and you've got to be the best person in that pile in order to get the place.
I know some people on the streets that actually work.
Oh yeah,
as often as they can, considering their circumstance, and they're really good people. Though we are at the end of the show, and I can talk to you all day. You're amazing. Maybe I'm a little biased because you actually showed up for the show, and also Kinetic Glory forever.
I showed up wearing my ace.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of paid buckets here. Though you have 3 minutes of just whatever you want to talk about, and whatever you want the listeners at home or who are driving or wherever they are, what you want them to take with them. It's your 3 minutes. You can say whatever you want. Ready, go.
Okay, ready, go. So I think, now there's a log jam of thoughts in my head. I am a working mom from the neighborhood. It took me a long time to consider myself a professional politician, and it's just because I've been doing this job long enough that I feel like I'm really starting to understand it. At first, it was all about just helping people directly. Somebody needed the right phone number. Somebody had an abandoned vehicle with a dog in it in front of their house that was, scaring the kids. And I could help just address these like concerns directly for the people in the neighborhood. And then as I started participating in strategic visioning, and I see the process of how the council says to the staff, here's what you need to be paying attention to. This is what we are concerned about. We need housing. We need traffic safety. We need public safety. We need our parks to actually be maintained. We need to, as a city, address climate change in any way that we can, because the bay is coming in. We need to deal with that. And then the staff goes off and they find information, they find science, they find solutions, and they find grants to pay for those solutions. Then they bring it back to the council, and then we tweak it all up, and we go like, okay, yes, this, not that, this is great, but then this needs this on top of that, and this you got to go talk to the tribes if you want to do that. And then all of that turns into a plan, and then that turns into a project, and then that turns into action, and it takes forever. It's just such a slow process. But I was able to start seeing how I can, on behalf of the people of the Second Ward, influence the direction of Eureka as a whole, big picture. And I love the direction that we are going, and things are moving slowly. But when we talk about homelessness, when we talk about public safety, and we talk about public pride, these are the priorities that the council has set. And these are the things that are in progress. And I want to see those projects through. I want to see us continue on the path that we're on. And I want to keep pushing Eureka forward, because that's where we need to be going. We've got big changes coming down, whether we like it or not. Sometimes, whether it's wind or fish or the bay, there's there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think that we need to be coming up with innovative solutions and moving Eureka into the future with respect to the past. But we have problems, and we need innovative solutions. Was that 3 minutes?
We have problems and we need innovative solutions. Yes, you're excellent on time. And that is about all the time we have today. Thank you to Kati Moulton. Thank you to Kati Moulton by Ken Franswell, is it?
What?
Kenneth, your running opponent.
My opponent's name is Kenny Carswell. Kenny
Carswell. That's how much I know about him. I just want that to be noted that if he wanted people who live in his ward to vote for him, maybe he should have come out and said hi. We're a small community, and I'm always down to chat. Wish him well. I truly wish him well. And
seems like a perfectly nice guy.
Good luck. Yeah, he seems great, actually. Like, he seems like really sweet. No doubt about that. We'll be back next week with another Thursday Night Talk. If you have topics or suggestions for the show, please email us at kzzh@accesshumboldt.net. Just a reminder, this show replays on Friday evenings at 8 p.m. right here on KZZH 96.7 LP-FM. And you can watch the show on Access Humboldt's YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us, and
get out and vote.
Get out and vote. Thank you. Please go vote. You're also allowed to skip things. If you don't know what to vote for, it's okay to undervote. It's super okay to do that. If you're like, I am so confused that I don't know how to vote for this, it's okay to just not vote for that proposition or whatnot. And if you do want to know more about propositions and measures, look back on the Thursday Night Talk shows that we've had. We've had full discussions. We've had a great one with Eric Kirk. Please check that out. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week on Thursday Night Talk.